There are two kinds of billionaires. The loud ones who drown the world in their excess, and the quiet ones who build fortresses, not just from stone and steel, but from silence, scars, and secrets. Liam Ashford was the second kind. At 38, he owned more hotels than he had birthdays. From sun-drenched villas in the Maldives to sky-kissing towers in Manhattan, his name was synonymous with opulence. But Liam didn't vacation. He didn't party. He didn't touch champagne unless it was to raise a toast for someone else. His suits were always gray. His voice, always low. And the tabloids? They had nothing on him, not one scandal, not one woman. Rumors circled like vultures. He's asexual, some whispered. Maybe he's gay and hiding it, others speculated. But the truth was far darker, and it slept in a locked room in the back of Liam's mind, a room that still echoed with the sound of a slipper striking skin, a belt uncoiling, and a voice that hissed, "You're nothing. You'll always be nothing." His mother, Margaret Ashford, had been a socialite, a beauty, and a monster. No one knew what went on behind those high Victorian walls of the Ashford estate. But Liam remembered. Every single second. So he built his empire brick by brick, mile by mile, across oceans and borders, anything to stay ahead of the memory. And if it meant living alone in penthouses the size of cathedrals, so be it. But fate is an old drunk with a mean streak. It doesn't care how rich you are. It doesn't care how far you run. And Liam's reckoning began on a Tuesday. At 10:43 a.m. sharp. Her name was Ava Moretti. She wasn't supposed to be there. She was just a consultant, flown in last minute when the Dubai project fell apart. But she walked into the boardroom like she owned it, late, flustered, and soaked from the rain, with a laptop clutched to her chest and dark curls that looked like they'd fought a hurricane and won. And Liam, the man who hadn't felt anything in years, looked up from his notes and forgot the sentence he was reading. Of course, he didn't speak to her. Not right away. He watched. Calculated. He told himself it was professional curiosity. That her quick thinking and razor-sharp strategies intrigued him. He lied. Because Ava's laugh cracked something inside him, something old and rusted, and from the moment she pulled her chair up to the table, the war inside Liam Ashford began. And the walls? They started to crumble. Ava Moretti didn't belong in Liam Ashford's world and she didn't care. She wasn't born into wealth or legacy. She carved her name out of survival, one late-night email at a time, one shattered ceiling after another, and she walked into the Ashford International headquarters like she was there to fix the place not fit in. She didn't know who Liam was at first, not really just the icy man in the tailored suit at the head of the table, the one who didn't blink when 5 executives fumbled their excuses for a failed launch in Dubai. He just stared and the silence made them sweat. Ava didn't sweat. She flipped open her laptop, adjusted her glasses and said in front of everyone. "You've been targeting the wrong market. The whole pitch is backwards. You're trying to sell elegance to adrenaline junkies." Silence. Someone coughed. Liam looked at her and said nothing, his gaze resting on her like a hand he hadn't decided whether to shake or crush. "You're saying we scrap everything?" he asked finally. Ava shrugged. "I'm saying you hired me to fix it, so let me fix it." No one talked to Liam like that. Ever. But he didn't fire her. He told everyone to leave the room except her. And when they were alone, he stood and walked to the window, the city sprawling beneath him like a game board, and she watched him like she already knew he wasn't used to being challenged. "You're not afraid of me," he said without turning around. "No," she answered, "but you're afraid of something." That made him turn. Their eyes met. And for a second Liam felt it again, that fluttering chaos like a bird loose in his ribcage. They worked together for weeks after that. At first it was just late nights and whiteboards and caffeine and clashing ideas, and Ava saying things like "you're too cautious" and Liam saying "you're too reckless," but slowly something changed. He stopped looking at her like a threat. And started looking at her like a secret he wanted to keep. One night they were reviewing a pitch deck in the conference room, the city outside in twilight, and her shoes off, her feet curled on the chair, and she laughed at something he said, and he wasn't sure what possessed him, but he smiled. He never smiled. Ava saw it. "You should do that more often," she said. "What?" "Smile like a human instead of a Bond villain." He chuckled and leaned back in his chair and asked, "What if I told you I don't know how?" She looked at him for a long time and said softly, "Then I'd say someone taught you the wrong things." That night he didn't sleep. He sat in his penthouse with the lights off, remembering things he'd buried long ago, the smell of whiskey on his mother's breath, the sting of a slap, the way she told him love was weakness and women were traps. And Ava. Ava, who barged into his world with messy hair and impossible dreams and dared him to care. She was undoing him piece by piece. And he didn't know whether to stop her. Or let it happen. He hadn't been back to the estate in 15 years. The air was thicker here. Everything about the Ashford estate felt like it had been dipped in dust and rage and preserved just to punish him with the memory. The driveway twisted like a snake and ended at the great black iron gates, and beyond them the house loomed tall and gothic and wrong. The door was already open when he arrived, like she knew he'd come. His mother. Margaret Ashford. The woman who once told him men who cry should be drowned, not comforted. She was sitting in the drawing room with a brandy in her hand and contempt in her eyes, the same way she always looked at him, like he was a bad investment. "Well, well," she said without standing, "the billionaire returns." He said nothing at first, just looked around at the place where he was broken, then forged. "You should burn this house down," he muttered. She laughed, that sharp brittle sound like glass breaking. "And you should stop pretending your success makes you a man, Liam. Money doesn't cover weakness, it only perfumes it." He clenched his jaw. "I didn't come here for a sermon." "No, you came because you're confused." She sipped her drink. "About that woman, I saw her online, the consultant girl, clever mouth, cheap shoes, looks like she thinks her intelligence makes her pretty." "Don't talk about her." "Oh darling," she smiled, that poison smile, "you always did crave affection like a stray dog. You find a girl with a little warmth and suddenly she's your salvation." Liam's voice dropped low. "Why did you hate me so much?" Her eyes went cold. "Because you were weak," she said, "because you cried when your father left, because you loved too easily, trusted too quickly. You were soft, Liam, and I had to break that before the world did." "And did it work?" he asked. "Do you think I turned out fine?" She stood now, walked slowly toward him, her perfume thick and cloying. "No," she said flatly, "I think you're still that boy underneath all the suits and headlines, and I think she's going to find him and destroy everything you built." Then she leaned in. "And I can't wait to watch." He left without another word. But her voice followed him the way back to the city. That night he drank. Alone in his penthouse, staring at the skyline like it might save him if he looked hard enough. He didn't answer Ava's texts. Didn't show up to the pitch the next day. Because something in him had cracked. And he didn't know if it was the past bleeding through the present. Or the future slipping through his fingers. 3 days passed. No calls, no replies, no Liam. The hotel project stalled, the investors whispered. Ava held the weight of it all on her shoulders, but she wasn't worried about the millions on the line. She was worried about the man who was disappearing behind them. He'd vanished mid-sentence during a strategy call, his voice tight as piano wire, his eyes distant like he was watching a storm only he could see. Then nothing. Ava tried every number she had. No response. So she did what no one else had the guts to do. She marched into the elevator of Ashford Tower, rode it all the way to the top, and banged on his penthouse door like she was there to evict a ghost. No answer. She knocked again. "Open the damn door, Liam." Still nothing. So she sat down right there on the marble floor of the hallway, legs crossed, coffee in one hand, determination in the other. And she waited. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Then the door cracked open and Liam stood there, shirt rumpled, eyes bloodshot like he hadn't slept in a week. "What are you doing here?" he asked. You dropped off the planet and I got tired of waiting. She walked past him like she belonged there. I'm not one of your yes men, Liam. I don't go silent when things get messy. He closed the door behind her slowly, like he wasn't sure if he wanted her in or was just afraid to keep her out. You don't understand, Ava. She spun around fast. Then explain it to me. He stared at her for a long time, then said. I saw her, my mother. Ava's breath caught. And she reminded me what I am. A laugh escaped her lips, but it wasn't kind. No, Liam, she reminded you of what she told you you were. There's a difference. You don't know what it was like. Then tell me. He didn't. He turned away, walked to the window, looked out at the city like it could answer for him. She told me love makes you soft, that people will only use you if you let them close. And you believed her. He said nothing. She walked up to him, stood close enough to make it impossible to ignore her. I've seen you lead boardrooms and bury deals with a single glance, but you won't fight your own past, is that it? I'm not worth saving, Ava. Bullshit. He looked at her, then really looked, and saw the fire in her. You think I came here because I pity you, Liam? You think I stayed on this damn project because I needed the paycheck? You could have fired me on day one and I would have kept showing up, because somewhere between the first coffee and the fifth crisis I stopped seeing you as a boss. Her voice cracked. And started seeing you as someone I wanted to protect. He closed his eyes. You don't know how dangerous that is. She touched his chest. I don't care. Silence stretched between them. Then he said the one thing he hadn't told anyone in years. When I was 9, she locked me in the cellar because I spilled orange juice on her piano. Ava flinched. I was down there all night with the rats and she told the staff not to feed me. She said it was the only way I'd learn control. Her hand moved to his. Liam. And every time I wanted to love someone after that, I saw her face and heard her voice telling me they'd leave, that they'd lie. You don't have to hear that voice anymore. He looked at her like he didn't believe it was possible. But her hand was still in his. And that voice in his head was finally being drowned out by something louder. Her. He didn't change overnight. The voices were still there, the old reflexes, the hesitation when kindness came too close, like he was bracing for the slap after the smile. But Ava didn't ask him to be perfect. She just asked him to try. She started small. You're not allowed to apologize for breathing, she said one morning as they walked into a board meeting and he instinctively stepped aside to let a junior partner take the lead. You're Liam freaking Ashford, she whispered, act like it. He did. The numbers came back stronger than ever. Dubai restructured under Ava's plan, turned a profit in 4 months, and Tokyo followed suit with a 19% spike in Q2. The press started calling it the Ashford revival. But inside the tower, Ava just called it progress. She stood beside him during presentations, whispered quick strategies between bites at investor dinners, straightened his tie with one hand while emailing corrections to a marketing brief with the other. She was chaos and clarity and caffeine and confidence, and he started to believe. There was a moment. In Milan. He was scheduled to speak at an international hospitality summit full of polished CEOs and legacy heirs and old money vultures who never took him seriously because he was self-made and silent. He was shaking backstage. Sweat beading under his cuffs, heart pounding so hard he couldn't hear himself think. Ava walked up, took his face in her hands. Look at me. He did. You built this empire from nothing, Liam. You slept in conference rooms, you bled for every decimal on that spreadsheet. You are not some broken little boy anymore, you are the storm now. And then she kissed him. Right there. A quiet electric kiss that silenced every ghost in his bones. He stepped on stage. And destroyed. The crowd rose to its feet when he finished, and a photo of him standing tall in front of 100 spotlights went viral under the headline Ashford Ascends. Back in New York, the energy shifted. He held his head higher. Walked faster. Smiled more. The staff noticed. Investors trusted him more. The whispers turned into respect, and the men who once thought he was too quiet started asking for advice. But success always draws attention. And not all of it friendly. Margaret Ashford saw the headlines too. And when her assistant brought her the article she smiled thin and cold. "He's growing teeth," she said, finally. Then her eyes narrowed. "Let's see if he survives it." Back at Ashford Tower, Liam leaned against Ava's desk late one evening watching her scribble notes in a frenzy. "You do know I pay people to handle this stuff, right?" She glanced up smirking. "Yeah, but none of them look this good doing it." He laughed. It was still new, that sound. But it was real. He touched her wrist lightly. "You've done more for me than anyone ever has, Ava." She looked at him, then serious. "You did it yourself, Liam. I just helped you remember who you were under the ashes." He kissed her like a thank you and a promise. But neither of them noticed the shadow growing just outside the tower. Because when a man starts to heal, there's always someone waiting to rip the bandage off. It started with a file left open on Ava's desk when she stepped away for coffee. Nothing unusual, just a quarterly financial brief from the Paris property. Except it wasn't. Liam glanced at it out of habit, then frowned. There was a clause he hadn't seen before. A silent shift in ownership writes a slow bleed of power out of his hands and into a shell company he didn't recognize. His stomach twisted. Ava returned and saw his face. "What is it?" He turned the screen to her and pointed. "This clause, this wasn't in the original restructure." Her face changed instantly. Eyes sharp, voice low. "That's not from Paris. That's someone planting something." The next hour was a blur. Lawyers called. Servers scanned. IT scrambling through every corner of their encrypted vaults. It didn't take long. A breach. Internal. Subtle. Deliberate. And signed with a name Liam hadn't heard in 10 years. Isabel Vance. His ex. The one who wore ambition like perfume and betrayed him with a smile that felt like silk until it slit his throat. She hadn't just hacked the system. She'd bought a seat at the board. Quietly over the past few months, using offshore proxies and buried accounts, she'd acquired just enough shares to disrupt. To threaten. To destroy. Ava stared at the report. "She's not just here for the company." Liam nodded slowly. "She's here for revenge." Later that night he found a red envelope slipped under his door. No return address. Inside was a single note. "I built you once. Now I'm going to break you better." And beneath it, a photo of Isabel. Standing on the steps of Ashford, Paris. Smiling like she already owned it. Ava stood at the window behind him, arms crossed tight. "She's going after the legacy." "No," Liam said quietly, "she's going after you." Because Isabel didn't believe in collateral damage. She believed in surgical strikes. The next morning was chaos. Stock dipped. Rumors leaked. Clients pulled meetings. The press started circling like sharks around blood. But Ava didn't blink. She stormed into the crisis meeting in a blazer and sneakers with a USB drive and a plan. "Here's what we're going to do," she said before anyone could panic. "We're going to beat her at her own game." Liam watched her command the room like she'd been born in that chair. Later he pulled her aside. "You don't have to fight this war for me, Ava." She looked at him like he was insane. "I'm not fighting for you, Liam. I'm fighting with you." That night they stayed late at the office. Ava on the phone in 3 languages coordinating a takeover block. Liam tracing old paper trails and unraveling Isabel's shell game. And somewhere around 2 a.m. he turned to her. "You could walk away, you know that, right, before this gets personal." She looked at him dead in the eye. "It already is." Ava didn't sleep for 3 days. She ate conference calls for breakfast, drank betrayal with her coffee, and spent nights running scenarios with Liam sprawled on his office couch like a soldier waiting for the next bomb. They were holding the line. Just barely. But then came the email. Urgent, financial disclosure request, Ava Moretti. She opened it and her heart stopped. It was from a private investigator. Isabel's. And attached were documents she wasn't ready to explain. Liam walked in right as she slammed the laptop shut. His voice soft. Ava, what was that? She hesitated too long. Liam froze. You're hiding something. She stood slowly. I was going to tell you. What? She opened the file again with trembling hands. It was all there. The wire transfer. A brief contract. A single name circled in red. Margaret Ashford. Liam's mother. Your mother paid me 6 months ago to sabotage you, Ava said quietly, before I ever stepped into that boardroom. He didn't move. Not a muscle. She offered me $500,000 to get close to you, undermine your deals, collect whatever I could and disappear. Liam's silence was louder than a scream. But I never took the money, Liam. I never did what she asked. I took the meeting, yes, but I walked away and then I met you for real, Anne. He stepped back like her presence burned. You should have told me day one. I was afraid you'd think everything between us was fake. And now I'm supposed to believe it wasn't. His voice was ice. She reached for him. Please don't do this. But he was already turning away. Already shutting down the part of him she'd worked so hard to open. Later that night the board convened in emergency session. Isabel had called for a vote to remove Liam as CEO, citing conflicts of interest and internal destabilization. And the numbers were too close. Ava stood outside the boardroom unable to breathe. And that's when the final twist hit. Lena. Liam's executive assistant for years, the quiet one who managed the schedules and guarded the secrets. Walked up with a manila folder. You need to see this. Inside were call logs. Isabel's voice on tape. And Lena's. They were working together. I pretended to play dumb, but she slipped up last week during a call. Lena said softly, she's not just trying to take him down, Ava. She's planning to sell the Ashford brand to an overseas conglomerate once he's gone. Ava's blood boiled. No. She straightened her shoulders. I'm not letting her erase him. Inside the boardroom Isabel was smiling. Until Ava walked in uninvited. And tossed the folder on the table. Meeting's over, she said. You're not taking this company. Isabel's face twisted. You're not even on the board. Ava leaned in. Not yet. But tomorrow. I will be. And when I am, I'll burn every bridge you thought you owned. Liam looked at her then. Really looked. She was shaking. But standing. For him. With him. And for the first time since his mother's slap echoed through his childhood bedroom. He felt like he might survive this. The boardroom was silent. The vote was tied. Liam stood at the head of the table, calm on the outside, hurricane on the inside, knowing that one more vote would decide whether he stayed or was erased from the company he built from nothing. And Isabel. Smirking in crimson lipstick, already texting lawyers, already tasting the victory like wine. Then the door opened. Margaret Ashford walked in. Everyone stared. Even Liam. Especially Liam. Because his mother hadn't left the estate in years, not since the tabloids caught her slapping a valet and calling him poor. She moved like royalty and poison and took the last empty chair at the table. I believe I still hold one seat on this board, she said. Gasps. Even Isabel looked surprised. Margaret looked at her son like she was seeing him for the first time. You've become something, she said. And then. She voted. In his favor. Liam blinked. What game are you playing now? She smiled thinly. No game. Just cleaning up the mess I made 30 years ago. And then she stood and left. As if she hadn't just flipped the entire world upside down. The room erupted. Isabel's face collapsed from smug to shattered as security escorted her out under a rain of stunned silence, and Ava grabbed Liam's hand and whispered. "You won." But Liam didn't smile. Not yet. Later that night in his office, after the chaos had cleared, Ava curled up on the couch, shoes off, hair undone, champagne in one hand. "So what now?" Liam sat beside her, the city glowing behind them. "I give it away," he said. She turned to him sharply. "What?" "I'm tired of being a king on a broken throne. I want to build something new with you, not just for profit, for people, for purpose." She stared. "You're serious?" He nodded. "And I want to start with this." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small black box. Ava froze. "Liam." "It's not a ring," he said with a smile, "not yet." Inside the box wasn't jewelry. It was a key. To a new place. He looked at her. "I bought an old boutique hotel in Tuscany. It needs everything, a full rebuild, fresh vision, a new legacy, one that's ours." Ava laughed once in disbelief, then pressed a kiss to his cheek. "You really are full of surprises, Ashford." He grinned. "You haven't seen anything yet." 6 months later. The Ashford Legacy Hotel reopened in Florence. But this time it wasn't just about marble floors and gold service. It had a heart. It had her touch. And his soul. Liam stood on the rooftop terrace at sunset, glass of wine in hand, Ava beside him, guests laughing below, music floating through the air. And for the first time in his life, he didn't feel like he was running. He felt home. Meanwhile, back in New York, Margaret Ashford checked into a private wellness retreat in Vermont. And every week, she got a letter. No return address. Just a single sentence in each. Written by Ava. "You broke him, but I rebuilt him better." And every week, Margaret read them. And said nothing. But one day she smiled. A tiny, tight smile. And said to her reflection, "Good." And just like that, the boy who was raised by shadows fell in love with the woman who lit every room she entered. And together, they rewrote the ending. Not with vengeance, but with victory. Not with ashes, but with fire. And love. That didn't need permission. Or forgiveness. Only truth. And time. And each other.